It's 4 sharp, so we will start with this last hour and the last presentation, both uh, done by or brought by Eline Picavet and Jean-Michel Leux. Eline Picavet is the pricing and reimbursement head of Novartis, where she leads strategic initiatives to ensure patient access to innovative therapies. Prior to this role, she served as a market access manager in oncology at Novartis, focusing on enabling access to groundbreaking cancer treatments. Eline holds a PhD from KU Leuven on market access for orphan drugs, and her doctoral research provided valuable insights into the four main components of market access, which is registration, pricing, reimbursement, and uptake, integrating health economic considerations into the development of orphan drugs to optimize their value for money and facilitate market entry. In 2015, Eline worked as a postdoctoral researcher, furthering her expertise in health economics and market access, laying the foundation for her impactful career in the pharmaceutical industry. And then Jean-Michel Leux is the head of public affairs at Novartis, and he has a decades-long track record in biopharmaceutical research and is committed to improving the future of healthcare in Belgium. To this end, he engages in open and constructive collaboration with various partners to jointly develop innovative and sustainable solutions to better serve patients and physicians. He has a background in biomedical sciences, political sciences, and European affairs, and he worked at other pharmaceutical companies before he joined Novartis. Jean-Michel and Eline, I see you and thank you for joining us, and we look forward for your presentation.
Thank you, Hilde. So it's not two times Eline. I'm Jean-Michel, and Eline is
The other
the
one.
the blonde. It's also the birthday of Eline, so I would like also
Oh,
to
yeah,
say that to
it's true. I
everybody.
noticed it in my agenda.
So
Sorry.
I think we should
Happy
also.
birthday.
Well, great. Eline, sorry, I don't want to be.
I'll share my screen.
Yeah, thank Great.
Happy
So, like
birthday.
Hilde said, we both work for Novartis, and I think you had a very interesting program today. I heard. I hope we can bring you, from our perspective, how we see access, how we see the need for access, how we see the current challenges, and that you our objective is at the end of this presentation that you understand our business a bit better, to be even more critical or to be even more interested in how it works and to improve it in the future. So I think that's the objective. So just quickly, who is Novartis? So Novartis operates in the Belgian market. I think everybody knows. I think you know, but not everybody knows. Belgium is really the pharma valley in Europe and also the world, you could say. So we're really one of the sectors contributing the most to the GDP, also most to the exports. Also, if you hear now that Trump will have tariffs on pharmaceuticals, this will hit 25% of Belgium export, so potentially. So just to say that this it's really big, and we are a really big sector for Belgium, and this has historical reasons, and it also has good repercussions for the patients, because we're also quite good in clinical trials, although we have some decline overall there because of European harmonization. So who is Novartis? We have a footprint in Puurs, where we have a factory in ophthalmology. It's now called Aseptics, because we try to. That's on the next slide, I think. We have a site in Puurs where we produce mostly ophthalmology products, but mainly also aseptic production. It's called like that. We have in total 1,800. It varies, 1,006 to 2,000. It depends on the flexibility. We are the second pharmaceutical group. We are a purely innovative right now, so you might link us to Sandoz and others, but that's finished. So we are now a standalone innovative company. And our Belgian affiliate, like we call it, where Eline and myself work, have between 250 and 300 employees. And of course, we also have an EU representation office, which is actually basically the lobby office for the European affairs. So, like I said, what we wanted to bring you today was a bit of a perspective on how our industry works, because very often, and it's not only with the lay public, but it's also with physicians, with key opinion leaders, they don't always really understand our business model. And I think this is really crucial, because a lot of the challenges that we have in access, where we will come up later, well, already, are linked to this, and are linked to this, very, very, to the essence of our business model. So, what we do is that we start clinical research very early. Like, if you say today, the molecules we found today are molecules that we found 10 or 15 years ago, discovered, and then we have, of course, the whole phase of clinical development. In this clinical development phase, you have the preclinical, the first in human, so first animals, first in humans. Then we scale up every time our clinical research to phase one, phase two, phase three, and then we have, if everything goes well, an EMA authorization. I think it's important for people to understand that during this time period of 10 to 15 years, we don't have any revenues. So this is all, let's say, at risk. And this is all investment that a company does, knowing that afterwards, of course, we will enter the market and be able to treat patients. So it requires huge investments for our business, for our company, to make these decisions on whether we invest in the molecule, yes or no. And also it shows the importance of market access, because of course, if you don't have access to your drug, then of course you don't have, and that's the right side of the slide, the fact that you can, recoup your investment, but also create added value to invest in new molecules, and to have a profit that also needs to offset a lot of the molecules that didn't arrive. And we'll get to that to the next slide. Just on this slide, I think it's really important for you to understand that during the time, and we'll come back to it, where we enter the market, and we're able to have the patient, to treat the patients. Well, that's starting from EMA approval, right? That you all know. And after EMA approval, we do the reimbursement process in every European country. Just going to keep it simple on the European market. And then, of course, like in Belgium, it takes up to 500 days. I will also get back to that. And then after 500 days, we can finally start recouping the investment. So it's very important there, of course, that the price that we have is reflected on the value we bring, because sorry, I have a cold like half of Belgium. The price that we get there will make sure that we're able to have a positive investment ratio, because once our patent is over, and that's typical for the pharmaceutical industry, we have a generic competition, we have price decrease, and then let's say our revenue really goes down. So the time frame in which we as a pharmaceutical company in Europe can win back the investment that we made on the molecule is quite limited. It's between, I would say, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And in this time, we really need to have the to be sure that we have all the recovery investment. Next, please. So that's also, I think it's very important also to understand that, like I said, it's not that every drug we touch becomes a treatment. A molecule, 1 in 10,000, and eventually arrives to a regulatory approval, and then afterwards you still need reimbursement. How come? Yeah, things just fail. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes you have safety issues. And sometimes also in phase 2 or phase 3, we see that the competition is way superior and that we will have no place on the market. So this is also something that people don't always understand and forget, is that, of course, we don't have a view always on what our competitors are doing. And it's for the good of the patient, of course. We can be happy about it. But just from a company perspective, you invested a lot of money in a certain molecule, you believe in it, you make a business case, and then it finds out that the competition is far superior because they have excellent clinical trials, and they will enter the market way before you. Well, that's excellent for the patients, but for us, it also means that this is an investment that we cannot recuperate. So just to give you, it's a very complex sector with a lot of risk, and this risk is always reflected also in access, because both are really linked. Voilà. And I think also on the development, we also have to say that the times of the low-hanging fruit is also over, meaning that we are really now, the cost for R&D is really increasing, and in the In the last numbers, it's about 2.7 billion to put the drug on the market. So you see that also there, it's not, to be very bluntly, the Dafalgan and the paracetamol, it cannot be compared to the Celangine. It's black and white. It's absolutely bad comparison, but you understand what I mean. We are now in far more complex therapies for niche populations, rather than the broad therapies where a whole patient population benefits, and which the development was quite low in price. And that's also something we need to take into account. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a background that the pharmaceutical industry is it's a risk-based industry, so it's about taking risks and about making sure that in the end, once we have regulatory approval and access, which will go now, we are able to get back the investment we made, but also even further be able to invest even more. And we, as a pharmaceutical industry, we invest in total 30% of our revenue in R&D, which is one of the highest in every sector. It's also because, of course, we have patents that expire, and if we don't do that, we are out of business. But that's really the cycle of our business model, which is very important. And then this is just to set the scene. I think, Eline, now it
Yes.
comes down
Yep.
to access.
Right. Thank you, Jean-Michel. Exactly. That brings us to the part of what we call the patient access. And as Jean-Michel already explained, there is a part where we obtain the marketing approval at the European level, but then, of course, we still need to get the reimbursement on a national level. And this is actually a relatively old slide, but it's more and more becoming reality, that we see that there is a balance that we need to find between wanting to find shorter timelines for access to new therapies, but at the same time, we also see that the demands are increasing, that more and more data is required to be able to obtain that access. So we really need to find the balance between how can we optimally provide access for new innovations. And at the same time, it's something that we cannot ignore, that there is a willingness to pay in the healthcare system that is becoming more and more under pressure. It's been in the news a lot lately that the budgets are relatively tight, and you need to find ways to maximize the health that we obtain with a limited budget. And this is also explained actually on the next slide. It's really finding the balance between what do we want to achieve, what type of health do we want to prioritize in our country, in our community. Do we focus on, for example, the diseases that affect a lot of people, like cardiology, or do we want to focus on the more rare diseases? Or and how are we going to use the budget that we have available? And this is actually a decision that is made on individual level in the different countries. And that is one of the reasons why we see a lot of variation at the moment in terms of access around the European countries. And there is a study published on that topic, and it's coming from FPA. So FPA is the European Association of all the pharmaceutical companies. And they publish a study each year called the Weight Indicator, where they analyze what the average delay is for an access to a new innovation. And in order to do that, they really look at what new innovations have been approved at the European level. So that's the first gray bar. And you can see that over a certain time period, from 19 to 22, there were 167 new innovations authorized on the European market. And then you see the breakdown of each country and how many of those innovations are actually reimbursed on the market. And you can see that Belgium, unfortunately, is relatively average here in the middle, where we would like to see it more where we think we belong. And I mean between other countries with a similar GDP like Germany, Italy, and Austria. But unfortunately, it's the reality that we see at the moment is that the number of molecules reimbursed is actually quite limited, or close to half. And then at the same time, FPA also publishes a report that shows the delay between the European approval and the actual reimbursement in each of the countries. And there as well, you can see that Belgium is very average, with on average 565 days. But at the same time, you also see that there are a lot of countries that have a very fast access, such as Germany, Denmark, and Austria. So they really have a very short delay between European marketing authorization and providing access to patients. And as I said, FPA publishes this report each year. And actually the one from 23, which is the most recent one, shows that, for example, this average delay is always slightly increasing. So this year it's 14 days longer than the one from the year before. And also they see that the gap between the access in the highest access countries and the lowest access countries is actually increasing, and also the timelines are increasing overall. So we think from our perspective that this is not a good evolution on the market. At the same time, RISIF also analyzes or did their own analysis of the molecules that were in the weight indicator. So they took the same sample of 167 drugs that were EMA approved. And actually, they mention in their analysis that they received reimbursement applications for only 126 medicines in Belgium. So the difference is very significant. And of course, you can explain it to some extent. For example, if there is an orphan drug that is very rare and there are hardly any patients in Belgium, it's not unlikely that a company doesn't even apply for reimbursement in Belgium. On the other hand, the difference is so significant, that I think if you're looking for a research topic or something to investigate deeper, it's something that would be really interesting to look at further. From the point of view of the RISIF, they also say that the majority or the largest majority, so 2/3, is actually approved and reimbursed of all the applications that they receive. They also put into perspective the average delay between the EMA approval and the reimbursement. From their point of view, they say that there is a long delay between the EMA approval and the first reimbursement request of the company, on average 130 days. And that's something I think that could also be very worthwhile to investigate further what is actually causing this delay. Then at the same time, they also say that the company, during the procedure, so the normal reimbursement procedure should take 180 days. We see that on average it takes 380, but we see that there are also a number of clock stops requested, and on average 107 clock stop days are initiated by the company. And there you need to have some nuance, because at the same time, some of the clock stops are mandatory. For example, 120 days of clock stop are mandatory if you want to negotiate a managed entry agreement. Others are sometimes needed because you need to you need to involve an expert, and he brings his opinion during a hearing. So not all these clock stops are actually related to or are needed because of the way the procedure is going. At the same time, they also achieve or arrive at approximately the same amount of delay between the EMA approval and the reimbursement. Then the question, of course, is how can we speed up reimbursement and how can we provide faster access? And we're going to look at the Belgian perspective first. So this is the situation that we already, I think, explained. You have the marketing authorization, but then you really need to pass the fourth hurdle, which is obtaining the reimbursement. And sometimes the decision about the reimbursement is difficult to make because there are a lot of uncertainties. You can have, for example, a drug in an oncology indication where you have very good results on PFS, showing that the treatment might work. But because you don't have overall survival data yet, it's difficult for the authorities to really make a decision on, is this product or this medicine worthwhile to reimburse? And this is where we actually have a system of managed entry agreements in Belgium and in a lot of other European countries. And we call them managed entry agreements. We also call them conventions, and we also call them contracts. So that's all a bit of the same. And they're actually temporary agreements where we basically negotiate a contract between a pharmaceutical company and the health authorities. And it allows us to already provide access to a promising treatment. But at the same time, we also have a period of temporary reimbursement where we can look for new data and try to solve the uncertainties that were there in the beginning, but that we try to solve by the end of this temporary agreement. And then this convention, you can really look at it as a written contract. It's a lot of pages, and there's a lot of details in there. Of course, there's a part on the price of the medicine, on the duration. Most of them cover a period of 3 years. The element of the data collection is discussed. You can say these are the uncertainties that the company is supposed to solve, and we want that by the end of 3 years, for example. And then, of course, there is an important element on the financial arrangement that is also discussed in the managed entry agreement. And there, actually, there are 6 types of compensation mechanisms, actually 5, and the 6th one is the combination of all 5 of them, however you want. And then we see that in reality, most of the managed entry agreements are a combination of method number 1 and method number 2. So the first method is basically a fixed percentage of refund on the sales that you have for a product. For example, if you have a drug that costs, or you have a revenue of 20 million, for example, in the contract it will be stated that you pay a refund of 53% on the entire turnover. And then element number 2, which is often integrated, is that you also have a refund of the difference between the estimated sales and the realized sales. So if at the beginning, when you negotiated the contract, you said, I am planning to sell 30 million of this drug, and in the end you realize 40 million, the difference between the 30 and the 40 is going to be part of a refund towards the health authorities. And why is this so important, these managed entry agreements? As I said, it's really a way to provide faster access to the patient and also for the health authorities to have this medicine available, while there are still uncertainties around the molecule. If you don't have enough data yet to make a final decision on the reimbursement, it's an ideal mechanism to already provide innovation. And at the same time, for the health authorities, it allows them to really have a very strict financial framework where they have financial conditions and they know approximately how much providing this medicine is going to cost them. It also allows them to, after a period of 3 years or after a period of 6 years, if they see that the uncertainties have not been resolved, or if in the end overall survival is not being shown, that they can withdraw the product from the market. And that, I think, brings us to the European level, Jean-Michel. Jean-Michel?
Jean-Michel, you are on mute.
Sorry. Indeed, so there are a lot of issues and a lot of let's say frustration on getting access in Belgium, and you see that the authorities try to manage that all together. But that's not only in Belgium. I think as a whole, in the whole of Europe, we are trying to manage how to get access to all of the member states, because you saw the discrepancy between Belgium in comparison to Germany, but you also see the discrepancy with other EU member states like Romania, Bulgaria, or the Baltics, where you have even less products available, and where in a unified Europe, although there's not a huge competence on pharmaceutical access, and this is still a national competence reimbursement, it is always something that doesn't feel right. And so you see that, there are a lot of things that are going on to try to manage that gap. From a Novartis point of view, we have, let's say, 3 big principles, right? We want to secure enough research and development, IP, let's call it, for the future. We want to work on affordability, and we also want to make sure that the healthcare system are strengthened, are strong enough to be able to secure or to absorb innovation. And I will just use this as a framework also to see how it goes on the EU level. So if you go to the first one, which is affordability, you see that from a lot of countries, what they are doing is that they are looking for ways to collaborate. We'll come back to that on joint procurement, for example. They want to. Some countries say, why don't we have one unified price? Well, as an industry, don't agree with that, of course, because in an ideal world that would be possible. But of course, the reality shows us that we will not have the German price, but rather the Greek price or the Romanian price, which is completely normal because authorities are under pressure, especially in these days. And every savings they can make, they will make. So it's normal that they will try always to have the lowest price. So, for example, this is just a way to show that FPA are trade association, like Eline said, is working on the way to have equity-based tiered pricing. So it's a proposal of FPA where they say the strongest shoulders will carry the strongest weight, the heaviest weight, where they look and say, look, why don't you have a special tiering based on the tiering? And you see then that we would really, commit and say if this is the case, we would commit to file reimbursement everywhere. And this is something really important. And why is this so important now? I think just to give you a bit of the macroeconomic perspective, and we will come back to that. For the moment, there is a huge revision going on at the European level of the general pharmaceutical legislation. So this is a once in a generation legislation. Change, once generation legislative change, which is now ongoing, and it completely overhauls the European, let's say, the European pharmaceutical laws. So everything related to EMA, everything related to IP, everything related to crisis preparedness, everything related to, in the broad sense of regulatory affairs, it's being covered in this. And you see that, like I said, the willingness of the European Union to close the gap, which we completely agree, of course, which is something you cannot be against, the access gap between the richest and the poorest country. They are using some ways, and we will come back to that, for example, IP, to make sure that we are, I would not say incentivized, but penalized, that's actually better, when we don't file for reimbursement in certain countries. And so this is it's something very important which is going on at the European level, and we as an industry we want to respond to that. And one of the responses we gave was, for example, why don't we install equity-based pricing where it would allow us to have better access. Why don't we, in that little bullet number 3, have an access portal where all the companies can submit in a portal why a filing did not occur, or why a filing was not successful. This is now already in place, so you could access that, which is a company initiative. So you see that the Commission and the European institutions are working on solutions, and the industry is also trying to work on solutions to close this access gap. A second one is, like I said, I think IP now, or the Benelux. Eline, that's the next one, I think. Benelux. So, like I said, the countries are looking for more purchasing power, and they say, look, why don't we join us together and buy together drugs for, let's start with what they call very expensive drugs. So what they want is that they do the assessment together, which I think you had a session on HTA before, right? Will already be the case. But then they go even more a step further, and we go into joint pricing negotiation. Now, the problem we think with Beneluxa and these kinds of initiatives is that it's very much focused on pricing. So if you look at the website, this is language from the website. It's that these medications, they are extremely expensive, right? And we detract care from other patients. So this is written on a public website. Now, if you know that the share of the pharmaceutical budget is stable within the total amount of healthcare budget since roughly 10 to 15 years. It's a strong statement to make because we did not explode the budget anyway. So I don't know how we could detract care from other patients. And also it puts, they say, the pharmaceutical companies are putting under the position of national government under pressure. also there, I think it's a negotiation, and we all want to find an agreement. And the fact that some cases we don't get reimbursement in 50% of them shows that, yeah, it's also perhaps also not always the reflection of reality. I don't want to get into a fight on this with any authorities on that. I completely agree. But the fact is, and we should say the things as they are. It's really a cost exercise. And so in our direct experience, and we are one of the companies that have direct experience, because only three cases were successful.
More in the meantime, a bit more, but I don't
Okay,
know the exact number.
voila, whatever. Not 100 cases. So we are one of the cases where we were able to find an agreement. But we also found that it was extremely slow. And actually, what happened is that we just continued to negotiate with each of the different member states, and that it was just, that they used each other's price to lower the price. So there was a lot of bureaucracy. There was a lot of it was still very slow. It was still very heavy. And it was not really a joint negotiation. It was just some kind of an arranged negotiation with different authorities. And actually, that also makes sense, because don't forget that our healthcare systems are still very, very different. If you look at how the Dutch healthcare system is organized, with more private insurers, also with hospitals, with more, also just how people have less access to specialists, and we have more access to specialists. We have more hospitals, they have less. So it's also very difficult to do these kinds of negotiations in a way, because our healthcare systems are very, very different. So, and that's, I think, something we need to take into account in the future. On IP, that's something that's it's really really important, because I think you all know, but like I said, so for us, intellectual property is the basis of our business model. I come back to what we said in the beginning, and I realize these are very heavy slides, but it's good for your to reread, and then you have all the explanation. I think, like we said, so we have a very short time where we can recoup our investments. And this time is being modulated by our intellectual property, because once we have our intellectual property, which is no longer valid, which erodes, or which determines, then we have loss of exclusivity. In Belgium, we have a price decrease, and also other countries, and we have generics entering the market. So it means that intellectual property, if we wouldn't have that, or a weakening of that, it would make that a lot of business cases for a lot of molecules would become negative. So you see that it's for us, it's crucial to have a very robust and predictable IP protection system, because that's the only way we are able to invest in medical innovation. And I think also the predictable there is very important, because as you know, as I said, if you start on investing in a molecule and you decide on that 10 years ago, it's a calculation. So people make calculation. Look, this is what our patent will be. This is how long think the clinical trials will take. This is what we believe can be a price we can obtain, and based on that, they say, is it viable or not to invest in a molecule. Now, of course, if you're going to start modulating IP, it becomes also more difficult in the beginning to make sure that is it worthwhile investing in a molecule. And of course, if you add more risk to an investment, it makes that some investment will not be made, meaning that some molecules will not arrive to the patient, and innovation will not happen. So what we believe is that our industry really has a robust IP framework, and the IP framework, I think, is explained on the next slide, where I think that's the current incentive. So it's really a very complicated system, where we have incentives for pediatric and extra incentives, or extra IP protection, for example, for pediatric. That's you can see on the first little, for all medicines on the right. You see that we have for orphan medicine also an incentive where we receive market exclusivity, and also therefore pediatric research, you receive extra years of market exclusivity. And you also see that they found a system where they introduced regulatory data protection. So that's the middle. And that's something now that they want to modulate. So to answer again on the question of global access and the discrepancies between the different member states on access, what the European Commission said, you know what we're going to do? We are going to work on this regulatory data protection and make it shorter. Now, in a nutshell, what is regulatory data protection? It's RDP. It means that your data is protected and that uh, the the generics cannot use it for their reimbursement files or even their submission file to EMA. Now, why is it important? Because it starts at EMA approval, and then you have 8 years plus 2 years of exclusivity still. So why is these 8 years? In 1/3 of the cases, this is still important. In 2/3 of the cases, the patent is long enough that the patent will cover the RDP will not be important. But in 1/3 of the cases, the clinical development period took so much time that actually when you come at EMA approval, you only have 5 years of patent left, which is very short because it's almost impossible then to recoup your investment. But then if you have RDP that protects your innovation for 8 more years, it brings 8 more years, or then actually 3 more years if you would have 5 years from patent left, which would have 3 more years where you can recuperate your investment, which is very important. So it's not always something we always use, but it's something that is being used in a lot of cases. And now, for example, to answer also the question, I think what's been asked to us, like what is going on? For example, this is something that is being modulated to get access. And that's the next slide. I think this is the proposal of the commission where you have 8 years and then market protection of 2 years, then the generics can have your data, but you still have market protection. And now they want to make it to 6 or 7 years, and they want to say, look, if you invest in unmet need, okay, that you could argue that's a good way. But second point B is launching. You have to launch in all the member states, and then you can have 1 year extra. So for us, there you see that we as a pharmaceutical industry, it's very difficult to make the decision makers understand that this touches upon the basis of our industry. If you touch on IP, if you make it, let's say, more conditional and much more unpredictable, it's also more difficult for us to launch new medicines. And I think that's also the next slide, which you can see that. Meaning that a lot of projects will not be viable anymore, and also a lot of SMEs developing those medicine would also not be viable because often, yeah, they certainly would not take the risk. Big pharma can perhaps has a bit more of an financial certainty to try at least or to make the risk. And also, of course, it will hurt people or countries where you have a lot of investment in R&D, because of course if you say let's do it or let's not do it on the molecule and you have a lot of R&D in your country, well, it will have an impact on R&D in Belgium. So I just wanted to also give you a concrete example of how an institution, how decision makers want to tackle access, wants to have a solution to that, and then how we as an industry have to always explain our business model and say, look, actually this is a very bad idea, and then we come with our own proposal, which is why don't we do equity-based repricing? Why don't we find the root causes, find the access portal, and we also would commit to file at least for reimbursement, so not launching, but filing, meaning also that the member state can. We still need to negotiate. We would commit to filing in all the member states. That's something perhaps we could think of in the future. So that brings us to, I think, low and middle income countries. I also wanted to share this with you because I think that's perhaps also what you wanted us to arrive to. But I think it's very important that you have all the background, because if I just do low and middle income countries, then we're just the bad guys, you would say, and then but that's not the point. I think what we wanted to show you is that it's a whole cycle, an innovation cycle, and that in the end if you would just, do only philanthropy in Europe or in the US or wherever, yeah, we would not have new innovations, new treatments, and we would not arrive to coming with new solutions to patients. But of course, for low and middle income countries, we need to be, of course, adaptive. And this is, I'm taking the same principles for Novartis, where what do we do in these low and middle income countries? So first of all, on R&D side, we have trial diversity. So we really try to have as much as a subpopulation diversity as possible. And also, we always also bring an access strategy now towards our R&D pipeline. So it's not always just is it viable or not economically, but we also start upfront already discussing and thinking about what is the access strategy for these molecules. On affordability, we already applied the tier system pricing, which I explained to you. We apply it also internally. So of course, we have a price that we have for a certain market, and then we do a tier pricing where we say, look, in certain countries you put that down, and then we also, of course, when it comes to health strengthening, yeah, we also really want to help the countries help strengthen their healthcare system. We are actually one of the good guys when it comes to access, I think, but I will show you later. So we really work on having a lot of access to patients. So you will see all these numbers where we do actually quite good. I just wanted to, I think the next slide is very important because it's and that's something I really believe in. It's not about doing it alone. So that's also something when a lot of things happens is that people and the governments put all the responsibility on us. And I think there we need to be fair and there to say that it's not about us. It's a shared responsibility, and we will have, if we want to have access to these healthcare innovations, everybody will have to play a role, and Novartis is ready to play our role. So, for example, on IP, we need to protect IP where we can protect IP, and it's very important. Of course, we will not enforce our patent in the least developed countries, and also in around 80% of the lower middle income countries. We don't enforce our patent, meaning that if a generic start to produce our medicine, we will not enforce and we will not do anything. That's really true. But of course, the one goes without the other. You cannot do that in one country, but also do that in and having a rewarding IP framework in the most developed countries. When it comes to pricing, I already said, so we have we believe in value-based pricing, but of course that's for more developed countries. When it comes to low and middle countries, we use tier pricing, but also there confidentiality is crucial because that's something that people say, yeah, you do secret contracts also in these countries. Well, it's just not true because yes, of course it's not secret. Somewhere it's true, but people have to understand that if other countries know your price, yeah, then of course you will always the lowest price will always be the reference price, and that's something also. Unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world where we say, okay, look, I understand you have a lower GDP, you have to pay less. No, we are in a very competitive world, and countries just say, look, he pays like that, I should also have that price. And lastly, I think on the healthcare system strengthening, that's also very important. And we started during the COVID crisis where they blamed, for example, Pfizer on not sending all the vaccines to certain countries. Well, if you know that you have to store the vaccine at was it minus 50, minus 70 degrees, well, in this country they just were not able to do that. It was not able so to bring the vaccine to certain rural populations. So of course you can predict, and I don't want to get too much into because it cannot be a very emotional discussion. But if you look at it also from, let's say, a bit more of a rational or let's say a fact based, it's true that yeah, the healthcare system is not always ready to be able even to absorb the innovation. For example, pens that have to be stored, shelf life of only a couple of days. I don't have to tell you, in certain countries, it's just not possible. And there also, I think we need to find ways to strengthen the healthcare system. And it cannot be that all that responsibility comes on us. It's also something where we need to collaborate all together to make sure that there is enough financing of the healthcare system so that when we come with an innovation, this innovation can be absorbed and can be reach the final patients. So that's also something we really believe in. I think that's it. for us. No, Eline, or one? Yeah. Oh no, that's the good part. I wanted to end with the good thing. So you have the access to medicines index. It's an independent. We have nothing to do with it. We don't pay for it. They evaluate 20 pharma companies on how we do, and we were this year the first one. So just to say that we are not shying away from our responsibility, not at all. So we really give access. We really try to give as much as access as possible. And also, for example, for malaria, we are also the ones really investing in clinical trials and new malaria medication for all these low, where the market is basically lower middle income countries. So also there, I think you can see that yeah, we're doing our part. So I'll stop there because this is more of a promotional, but it's independent. We don't have anything to do with it.
I'm very happy to hear this, that you pushed, well, not that you pushed GSK off the throne, but that at least it really does something, and that companies are really pushing ahead to become the one or the number first in the access to medicines index. For the program participants, we have a presentation in our final module by the Index Access to Medicines Foundation by Claudia Martinez. Thank you so much for this very interesting conversation. Do the program participants or the panelists have questions for Eline and Jean-Michel?
And Eline.
I thought Eline, it's her birthday. Of course, I mentioned her. No, because I do. Well, actually, you said, just for my own conclusion slides, which I will include for the students, you said a combination for the strategies for the managed tender agreements, 1 and 2 or 1 and 3?
1 and 2.
1 and 2. I wrote it down, but I wrongly noted it in my notes. Okay, with respect to the low and middle income countries, this is, I would say, what I very much love. You said that you won't enforce IP in low and middle income countries, or at least in 80% of the low and middle income countries. But I wonder, do you then actively work, for example, with the medicines patent pool to really push or put your intellectual property in a pool where it's organized to make sure that there's access available? Or in what way? Yeah, Jean-Michel.
I don't know if we work in the pool. I think we do because we are, like I said, quite a good student, but I cannot say for sure. But what we do work with is with a lot of distributors and with a lot of local producers also. So it's we really go into the country to make sure that we work there. So, but if the patent is on in the patent, I think so. Yeah, I think we have a lot of our drugs that are in the it's from the with WTO also the patent pool, right? Or is that what
The
you mean?
medicines patent pool, indeed.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
yeah.
Um,
I can look it up for you.
yes, yeah. Yeah, it's really, as you know, it interests me, of course. Um, I know I lost my question. Damn it. But I see, Ivana, you have a question, and of course, students come first.
Yes, thank you very much for the very interesting talk, both of you. I was wondering whether you can explain to us or give us an example how Novartis strengthened on healthcare system in a certain country.
Jean-Michel, you want to explain the RLT?
Yeah, I think for RLT, that's really what we do. So, but my battery is almost dead, so but it will be fine. So for RLT, radioligand therapy, short story, it's a therapy where the patients receive radionuclear treatments where they are then, of course, also radiated. So it means that for the healthcare system, it's a huge burden because this patient needs to be 1 day in the hospital or an overnight stay. We need to collect their feces, their clothes, and stuff like that. We need to keep them until the short half-life is over, etc. So for RLT, it's something quite, it's old, but there is a revival going on of RLT. We are one of the pioneers in that. Of course, if we would just say, look, this is our drug, this is our therapy, we come to the authorities and say, look, this is what we are, and then we basta. We also know that we will not have any uptake. So what we do is that we try to find ways together with stakeholders, and that's what we did with RLT for Belgium. I can also send you the paper, Hilde, where we put all the stakeholders together and we say, look, what is necessary and we invested in that. So it's an investment for Novartis Belgium. What is necessary for healthcare system to be ready? So how many rooms do we need? We need a hub to make sure to see how many of lead rooms in lots in leaden rooms. So do we need? How do we make sure that there are enough nuclear medicine that can give the product? How do we make sure that we have enough? How do we make sure that we have enough room capacity for clinical trials? And these are all things, for example, that the authorities did not think about on RLT, because of course they have a lot of platforms, but where we in Belgium do healthcare strengthening healthcare, where we think ahead and we bring stakeholders together and we give concrete solutions of this is how you can do it. Of course, you have to understand also that we cannot pay for these rooms, because you can imagine the conflict of interest if a big pharma pays for capacity or infrastructure of a hospital in Belgium. Well, then you have conflicts of interest. They say, look, if it starts like that, then or it would just be a donation, but we cannot pay. That's the law that says it. We cannot do the work of authority, so we cannot pay for investment that authority should have done. So we can do, of course, what we can do is facilitate a discussion, bring together stakeholders to think about it, but we cannot pay for rooms, for example. And so this is where you also see the barrier. In low and middle income countries, for example, for malaria, we really do a lot of I think healthcare strengthening by doing a lot of public awareness on our malaria drug, where we go really into the villages, where we do a lot of the things that the pharmaceutical is good in. Pharmaceutical industry is also good in informing, having connections with doctors. And for example, for malaria, we really bring a lot of our expertise to the different doctors in rural areas. And that's also something why we are recognized for by the WHO, for what it's worth, still in the world. So I think this is really something that we do, and so it's not an overall program, I can tell you, but it's really something we do in every country where we believe we do on healthcare system strengthening.
Okay, thank you. And I have one small question, if I'm allowed to. How do
Absolutely.
you think, this is just more a hypothetical question, how do you think that the international politics currently is, which is part of, I think, every single sector in our society, will impact the access to medicine, the access to clinical research, and the role of the pharma industry worldwide? What is your opinion about that?
Then you need to repeat again. So what is the role of the pharmaceutical
Well,
industry?
what do you think the impact will be on the role of the pharmaceutical companies regards to the new political in the international politics that it's moving in the different continents right now?
So it's what we see is that we have an administration that is very much against pharma in the US, but we still need to see what the impact is on that. Of course, when it comes to innovation, I think they will always support having access to treatment to patients, but they will, I think, for sure revive or relook at the system in the US. Now, in general, you'll see that the tariffs, for example, that's really a huge topic where we will hamper access. So it is really because if you put 25% extra, then the prices go up, and then some countries will not be able to pay for it anymore. So that's also something very important. In general, I think where the pharmaceutical industry should go to, it's much more into in the early phases of development already start discussing with authorities what do we need, and perhaps authorities need to understand that innovation is not made on order. You don't just do a takeaway on innovation. It's not how it works. That sometimes they want us to do. Yeah, you should find something now for COVID. You should find something for this. That's not how it works. But I think as an industry, we could also be a bit more inclined to understand what the government needs, and also understand what they look for evidence, what they are willing to pay for, what is the requirements they want. Because often we come with a lot of data and files that are not being then sufficiently heard by the authorities, because perhaps we didn't talk to each other from the beginning. So while if we would ask each other from the beginning, what do you need for us to get this price or this value, and they would say, look, you would need that and that data, we can already incorporate it into our clinical trials setup, for example. I think this is something. So I think we have been too much isolated and just doing your innovation on one side. Which I don't say that we tomorrow can just say, yeah, look, find this and we can do it. Huh? So sometimes you find a cure for something and you end up with a Viagra pill, which is has another meaning for something. So that's how innovation goes. So you never can predict it, but we can, I think, have a bit more of an discussion with authorities and try to align on the priorities and where we should go to. I think that's really important for the future, and also for us to be more, yeah, be more credible and not always in the corner where we are looked at as the bad guys, you know. So yeah, that's really for me in this geopolitical setting very important.
Thank you.
Matthias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivana. Matthias.
Thank you, Jean-Michel, for the presentation, and very happy to hear the last one. So therefore, my question is Novartis planning to submit for joint scientific consultations under the new HTA regulation?
I think Eline, you can answer that.
Yes, we have, but we won't have any molecule eligible in this year, but the one that we have in scope will be submitted in 2026 for the joint clinical assessment.
Very good to hear. I think that for the students all comes in place now. Are there other questions from the students? Otherwise, I will try to share my screen.